Hello, gorgeous ones. I hope you're all okay. Well, I'm at my house in Italy, and after 3 weeks of glorious sunshine and hot weather, we now have rain. We've had a couple of thunderstorms in the last few days, and the thunder is still grumbling and growling across the valley. So, apologies in advance if you hear some rattling windows. It's just my lovely old window frames protesting a little bit about Mother Nature flexing her thunderous muscles at us. We have more rain forecast tomorrow, but from the following day for the next 10, it looks good. And we're filling the swimming pool, and so by the time the weekend comes around, we should be ready to jump in there. Fingers crossed. Well, I've had a little bit of technical drama today, and I think it's probably atmospheric because my house is in the mountains, and sometimes the internet's a bit weird, and the technology doesn't always work as well as it should because of the air pressure and different things going on around me. So we'll see how we get on with this today. Apologies for any glitches, quirks, and bangs that are going to rear their head along the way. It's one of the joys of working from home. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit more today about the value and the power of a woman's story. A woman's memoir or story is an incredible thing. It's a powerful testament to courage, to survival, and to endurance. It's a validation of the wisdom gained from overcoming personal challenge and adversity. But it's also an offering of inspiration, of hope, of the joy that's found in the small everyday things. And even the minutiae of so-called ordinary life can be fascinating to the people who learn about it, simply because so much of it resonates, and ordinary life resonates on so many levels with other people who live or lead an ordinary life. The value of a woman's story is immeasurable for herself and for her family. But too many women make the mistake of thinking that their lives aren't interesting enough to write about. Many won't write a memoir because they think no one will want to read it. Well, that simply isn't true, but I want to explain where I think that notion of unworthiness comes from, and more importantly, what we can do about it. Because while we may not be able to change those dismal social attitudes that prevail in Western culture that seem to want to ignore the power and the value of an older woman's voice, we can and we really must change how we let that influence us. Many of us don't imagine that we're fascinating to others, and that's largely because we're not used to blowing our own trumpet and drawing positive attention to ourselves. And the biggest reason is that seeking validation somehow feels wrong, doesn't it? Asking people to reinforce that we are in fact worthy of attention. That is social conditioning at its finest. It's always been frowned upon to pump yourself up. How many times have you heard someone say, well, she's a bit full of herself, isn't she? Or, God, that woman, she never stops talking about herself, does she? It's a big part of the reason why so many of us feel like imposters in different areas of our lives, that nobody would imagine we're as interesting as we try to be or believe we are. We assume, therefore, that they wouldn't be interested in what we have to offer. Well, that's bollocks, my dear, because everyone has the real human legitimate need to be validated. I'm going to give you an example now from my own life about how a need for validation is interpreted in mainstream society. We've all got examples, but I'll give you a funny one. A very long time ago, I had a boyfriend. For this podcast, I'll call him Julian. And he had what most people would describe as a massive ego. He did come across as fairly full of himself, to be fair. He was always talking about his achievements and his acquisitions. And I remember one time when we went to see a friend of his so Julian could show off his new motorcycle. The friend took one look at the bike and said to me, "Are you going to get on the back of that thing with him?" And I laughed and I said, "Well, as you can see, I've got my own bike, but maybe once Julian and his ego have got on it, there might just about be enough room for me." And my comment was good-natured and gently teasing, which I always found myself doing to try and keep Julian's feet on the ground about himself. But the friend laughed and said to him, "Well, she's got you sussed, mate." And that showed me that he'd missed the point of understanding that his friend had a very deep need for validation. It went back a long way, and it was often annoying to others who didn't understand what it was really all about. It was about insecurity and seeking to be relevant and valid. Julian's way of going about getting the validation was irritating, but only to those who couldn't really see what it represented. But in general, to be fair, most people don't see that, do they? Most people can't or won't consider where behaviour comes from, what drives it. I've always been a lot more interested in what drives behaviour than I've ever been in the behaviour itself. There's always a perfectly good reason for every single thing people do or don't do, or what they do or don't say. And in that regard, everyone is interesting to me. Psychologist, guilty as charged. And that's the point I'm making here about validation. Julian wasn't afraid to ask for it, but in asking, he was seen as egotistical and vain, even by someone who was supposed to be his friend. And that's what we're all afraid of. None of us wants to be a Julian, to be written off by the ignorant and the unenlightened as simply full of ourselves or excessively self-absorbed. And subconsciously, we tell ourselves, don't we, that if our friends think that about us, who in the world would see us in a more favourable light? You know, many of us are the product of families who criticised or belittled or ignored us, and the same self-questioning applies. If my own parents and my siblings don't think I'm interesting, who in the world would want to read my story? Family and friends have a lot to answer for, but don't get me started on that today and where it's taken far too many of us. The truth is, we are the flawed human species in all our glorious imperfections, and we all need to be seen as relevant. The need for validation is a basic human need that sits very neatly alongside our need for human connection. But we don't tend to ask for what we need, do we? I'm not talking about the craving for attention that manifests in bizarre or inappropriate behaviour, which actually strays into the field of the pathological and needs to be worked on. No, I'm talking about the normal need that we all have to be regarded as something more than invisible or irrelevant. And you know, it bothers me. It bothers me a lot that we still feel that we need to stay silent about so much of the stuff we need the most. It's like you'll post a picture of a puppy on social media and you'll get 100 likes and comments. But you post a paragraph saying that you're struggling to deal with the problem, or you're unhappy about something, or even just offering your own perspective on something, and you might get 5 responses if you're lucky. You're left with the impression that people have run away screaming that they don't want to engage with the part of you that actually needs some support or wants validation for your opinion or your insight. I am very lucky that I have a nucleus of people that are always in my corner, and they're there to encourage me on those days we all have where the chips are down and the way forward seems like too much of an effort, or my feelings are disarranged in some way. I'm lucky, but we all have those friends, don't we? Those friends who bear witness when something traumatic happens to us, and they'll know that we're struggling, but they won't connect us or contact us to ask us how we're holding up. The silence from that end becomes deafening, and we end up left with the idea that us needing anything from them is enough to send them screaming for the hills, so they prefer the option of not engaging at all or offering a platitude on social media. At least that way they can be seen as offering support, but they haven't validated our struggle to us as people who really care. So the inevitable result of that is we internalise that too, and we end up feeling that people don't care. We decide on the back of that nonsense that our reality isn't interesting. So the question inevitably becomes, why would we want to write a memoir that nobody would want to read? But let me tell you something now. That is the wrong way to think, because it's society's narrative that needs to change, not our own. The mainstream, widespread, dysfunctional reactions to people who want to be seen and heard in the world in whatever way they can manage, that is what needs to change. Attitudes and responses need to change, but that's a big ask, isn't it? In a culture where we're simply seen as arrogant or self-focused and seeking to talk about our achievements or needs or experiences or anything else that relates directly to ourselves. There is a big element of genuine ignorance attached to that, but there's also the elements of envy or fear that stops people from admiring other normal, everyday people. Nobody wants to hear about someone else's big life because maybe they have a small one, and hearing about a big one only amplifies the smallness of their own. Nobody wants to move outside of their comfort zone because it would make them examine their own lives and maybe even look at what might need to change. And most people don't have the guts to do that. I spent 2 months back in 2007 riding my motorcycle across North America by myself, and the experiences I had were mind blowing. And my friends all know I did that, but none of them ever asked me about it. They never asked me what it was like, how it made me feel, what I saw, what challenged or delighted me. Nobody wants to know. So for a long time, I felt like it had been an irrelevant experience. I didn't stand up and say, hey, guess what I did? I did that. I didn't want to blow my own trumpet, and hardly anyone ever asked about my trip. Even my own family didn't. So I get how women feel when they have something wonderful to share, but the wall of indifference they're faced with is vast. But that experience was one of the best of my life, and I will be writing about it now. I've got to that glorious place in life where I don't care if anyone thinks I'm blowing my own trumpet, because that experience was something I fully deserve to be proud of, no matter what any critic might say. In the absence of enough enlightened people who can see and appreciate our reality for what it really is, we've stopped trying to make our voices heard. We have fallen silent, even to our friends and families. We have shoved our stories to the back of the wardrobe, and we've told ourselves that they simply aren't worth hearing. But that is bollocks too, darling, because they are powerful stories that contain the essence of who we are. And who we are matters. So maybe it's time to dust off those memories, pull out those diaries, the journals, the photos, and the important elements of your history out from the back of the wardrobe and get going on writing your story. It is an incredible story. There is so much rich detail that constitutes a flawed but beautiful and courageous life, even in the little things. And there are plenty of people who will want to hear it. Forget about the idiots in your orbit who can't seem to find it within themselves to say something nice or encouraging or validating of you and your efforts. We've all got those people in our lives who have their own reasons for refusing to be of help or affirmation, and we all have to decide how we deal with them. But in whatever way they choose to deal with their own icky emotional stuff, especially as it relates to how they react to us, we can't let them get in the way of shining. So take courage, dear one. Get up and shine and tell your story. Write your memoir or your poem or your novel or your self-help book. Say what you want to say and be part of the revolution that insists on women's voices being heard. Do it for yourself first, for any of a myriad of reasons you may feel compelled to, and for others as a secondary driver. And I guarantee that anyone who reads that story will thank you for it. I write novels, and they're all about the voices of older women, especially in the Teapot Cottage series, matriarchal voices with something worthwhile to say without apology. Check the books out if you'd like to. On my website, you'll find the details there. The women in the Teapot Cottage series speak with courage and conviction. They offer their stories in various forms and in various snippety little ways, knowing and caring about the truth, that their knowledge and their wisdom are of value to everyone who hears it. You are no different, but your story could make a difference to a woman who would benefit from hearing it, or a daughter, a grandchild, maybe sometime in the future. Another woman might be inspired, validated, encouraged, or enlightening by hearing your story. It might be an opportunity for you to tell your side of a family story that you haven't felt the courage or the influence to give voice to within your family. Men and women in your family could discover all kinds of incredible things about you that you deserve to have validated and heard, and they're things that they deserve to know. Memoirs are powerful. Women's stories matter. Your story matters. A lot more than you think. Contact me through my website, www.anniecookWriter.com. Take a look at the books I've written for and about women just like you and me, and let me help you bring your amazing story to life. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.